G'day. Welcome back to the Mark Pirotta Show. Chris is blowing a hole in your budget. Mossad is out and naming names. And what's in a name? Pauline Hanson's One Nation party becomes One Nation. Let's get into it. I'm Mark Pirotta, and this is the Mark Pirotta Show. Less than 3 weeks after the ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel, the Mossad is back to doing what the Mossad does best: intelligence. Now, the Mossad have come out with information as of today, naming the terrorist leader who is in charge of 11,000 troops across the world, stretching from Athens to Australia to the United States, who are directly under the report of one Sardar Amar. Now, 11,000 people across the world doesn't seem like that much, but it only takes one person to burn down a synagogue. Now, the Mossad are claiming that this individual is directly responsible for the fire bombings of the Adas synagogue down in Victoria. This comes on top of the news that we heard a couple of months ago from Australia's own intelligence that it was actually Iranian troops, and it was Iranian foot soldiers that were hired to do the attacks. That prompted the first ever removal of an ambassador from another country since World War II. Now, this episode is going to have a little bit of more detail into both of those topics, both the Adas synagogue and Islamic terror. But some pretty cool news is that I'll be doing an interview with an imam from Wollongong in the coming week/weeks. Now, as I suggested earlier in my last episode, I have to separate myself from Islamist and Muslim. And one of the things I've been looking into recently is the difference between Sunni and Shia Muslims. And the gentleman who I'll be speaking with is a Shia Muslim. Now, I still believe in my core that there is a place for Islam. I've said this in private conversations, specifically with my brother, who I disagree with on the topic of Islam. I believe that there's sort of like your weird younger brother who hasn't really grown up yet. Islam is Christianity 800 years behind. Not exactly the same. The text isn't the same. Obviously, the truth is Christianity, Catholicism to be specific, from my perspective and from all the evidence that I've seen. But it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I'll be putting some questions forward. Both questions about Islam in relation to Shia and Sunni conflicts internal, as well as the role of Islam, Muslims, and the prevalence of Islamism inside of Australia. Now, this news today about 11,000 operatives is one of the reasons why so many people are terrified of Islam across the world. Because numerically speaking, even if 5% of all Muslims are Islamist terrorists, we're talking hundreds of thousands, millions. Muslims across the globe today, they number over 2 billion. They are, by quantity, the largest practicing religion on earth. So 11,000 people is just one of very few organizations specifically tied to Iran. Now, Iran has terror proxies all across the Middle East. Most of them have been dismantled throughout the conflict between Israel and Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas. Much of the IRGC and Iran's own infrastructure has been severely damaged. But a cornered dog doesn't give up, it just bites. And so there is an element that this could get radically worse before it gets much better. And so I think that the Mossad starting to release this sort of information is probably a step in the right direction, but caution needs to be at the fore here. Because Israel obviously has a long way to go in the PR war. They lost it 100%. I don't know who was the marketing manager behind Hamas's campaigns, but they were brilliant. I mean, they were beating Hollywood for some of the stuff that they were putting out. Israel's got a long way to go. Now, this is a step in the right direction from my perspective in terms of getting themselves back to what they're really, really good at. And that is intelligence. Helping the world to stay away from the pain that comes with terror. Helping the world to see before it happens so that the headline isn't 1,000 dead, synagogue burned, cafe goers killed. The headline is terror plot thwarted, organization dismantled. That's the news you want to hear. That's the good stuff. That's what Australia pays almost, I believe it's $28 billion to Israel for. It's what America pays so much money to Israel for. It's the intelligence. It's the foreknowledge. And so we'll see what comes out of this, especially for Australia. I mean, Sadar Amar's name and face has been put out. The dude looks like a granddad. I mean, he's got a turtleneck, black turtleneck, a nice tan coat. I mean, if you saw him at a cafe, you'd assume he's drinking an espresso. He looks like an Italian. I'll pop up a photo up here in post, and he just looks like a normal dude. Looks like a movie star, if I'm being quite honest. It's not a great photo, but he looks normal. And so you wouldn't even know. So I don't know how Israel's got this information, but they're the Mossad. That's what they do best. Pauline Hanson. Pauline Hanson has taken her name off One Nation. Now, she's done this a couple of times, so it's not like it's the first time. It started off as One Nation, and then it became Pauline Hanson's One Nation, and then it became One Nation again. And then it became Pauline Hanson's One Nation again. And now we're back to One Nation. And I think it makes sense. I think that putting your name to it in the way that she did probably sort of locked her in a little bit, and it took too much of the focus away from the One Nation portion and made it about Pauline. And she's a person who is currently growing astronomically in terms of popularity across the country. But she's still a polarizing figure. Just the name itself brings a lot of bipolar opinions on this issue, right? And so she's come out. Well, the statement from Pauline Hanson's office is, the decision marks a defining moment for the movement, reaffirming its identity as a voice for ordinary Australians who value fairness, sovereignty, and unity. Senator Hanson said, the change symbolises a renewed focus on the principles that first inspired millions of Australians to join the movement, putting the nation and its people first. The rebranding reinforces One Nation's commitment to restoring trust in politics, protecting Australian values, and continuing the fight for everyday Australians across every state and territory. One Nation stands stronger than ever. One voice, one people, one nation. I think this is a great move. It comes right on the footsteps, right, or the doorstep of what we were talking about on the Saturday show, and it was a lot of Nationals members, some Liberal members, sort of hinting to moving over to One Nation. People are looking for a proper conservative movement. Now, Britain got reform, but One Nation, One Nation's been around for a long time. I think that trying to build a reform party in Australia, there's a couple of people already trying to do it. The Libertarians are on the rise, Advance Australia, but they're sort of more like a political funding group more than anything else. But Pauline's been around for a long time. She's got a lot of name recognition. And I'm telling you, her brand is ascendant at the moment because she's sort of softened her tone a little bit from the racializing of politics. She's saying Australia, one Australia. Just, if you're going to come here, at least love the place, right? Like, don't come here begging for help and then try and destroy the values of the nation that you're coming to, or bring along the stuff that made your nation so terrible to begin with. And so she sort of softened out a lot of the tones that she was using. It's way less racialized. She's starting to realize, which I really like as well, that we can really bring in the Aboriginal Australians and say, hey, look, if you want Australia to be the way that Australia is today, it's only going to get worse. Things don't get better for you. I mean, we saw this with the protests recently, right? That coalition is fracturing there. They're realizing that Australians are happy for you to be Aboriginal, right? A Hamas-loving Palestinian left-wing person who pretends like they're on your side. They're only on your side while you're on their side, and they're only on your side until you're on their side. And so that coalition is totally fracturing. Jacinta Price has done a great job at bringing in a large cohort of Aboriginal Australians to just call themselves Australians. Plenty of really, really big cultural Aboriginal voices are doing the same. And so I think Pauline's she's tacking on to that wave, that trend that is going towards the direction of, hey, this is Australia. We want Australia to be, and one nation, right? One nation. And not a lot of people know this, but we actually changed our national anthem to "We are one and free" instead of "We are young and free" as a result of advice from the Aboriginal community saying, well, you're not young because actually Australia has a very rich history. And I think that that's probably the tack that we need to take here. That's the conversation that we need to have, that Aboriginals were incredible stewards of the land for, 40,000 years. They never worked the land, right? But they were here, right? They at least had a very deep understanding of the land and the way that it functioned from an ecological perspective. They had a great respect for the land. They didn't have a great respect for each other, mind you. I mean, there is not much history there. Like, they never had writing. All of their stories are effectively word of mouth, and there wasn't much word of mouth coming to the colonial British about the bad things, right? I mean, they saw some of it. I mean, there were raids all the time. So we don't really know much about pre-colonial Aboriginal Australia outside of Dreamtime stories. But even the Dreamtime stories, most of them have been effectively falsified since the 1940s. They've effectively been created since the 1940s and 50s. And that was probably, whether it was created or written down, and that might be the only positive thing that came out of the Stolen Generation, is that we actually got to capture in writing the essence of what it was to be an Aboriginal. There's always a silver lining, right? I mean, as we discussed, I think it was episode 1, that was not a good policy. I think it was a good idea in terms of what they were trying to do, but it's like saying, hey, you know what? I want to go fishing, so I'm going to bomb the lake and just blow up all the fish, right? You just went full nuclear on something that should not have been that crazy. It should have been far lower scale, far more conversation, not just taking people's children. But silver lining is that we got raw, authentic understanding of the traditional word of mouth culture that was the Aboriginal culture. So that's all folding in. I think Australia is actually coming together in a way against all of these foreign interests and against all of these countries that we're never going to be able to affect in any real way, that are never going to affect us in a positive way. And we're turning a little bit more isolationist in a way, right? Going back to our roots and weirdly away from Britain. And that's one thing that I really want to see Pauline Hanson call for. It'll be something new. It'll be something radical. It hasn't been done in almost 30 years now. It was 2 years after she actually started her party was the last time we voted on this as a nation. And what I think we need to do is we need to vote for independence from Britain. We're going to get dragged down in the dumps by the rubbish politics of the European Union. And even though they're not part of it, they're still part of it. They're still part of the UN. They still get dragged into all the same rubbish, and we get dragged in as a consequence. To a large extent, we are still a colonial nation in a way. Like, they're still sending us their worst. We've had some good blokes. I met a couple of builders that I met recently, great guys, brilliant guys. right? But they don't send us, they're not sending us their princesses and princes, right? Like we're generally getting, and a lot of the time, at the moment at least, I saw some studies on this. I saw some numbers on this. I'm not sure how realistic they are. It's all Instagram posts and TikToks, so God only knows that they're probably all AI. But apparently, we're getting a lot of their illegal immigrants as well. So we're still convicts. We're still a convict colony. Right? So I think Pauline Hanson can use this as a one nation. We are one nation. We're not one nation under Britain. We are Australia, and we should be Australia for Australians, not Australia for Australia, but for the Queen. Right? We need to isolate ourselves as the nation of Australia, build proper connections with America so that we become their primary funnel of resources, rare earth minerals. And then from there, mate, we've got so much mineral wealth, so much capital, so much intelligence in this country as well. I don't think people realize that Australia is actually quite high in terms of education. Right. And a lot of that has to do with the way that we do our private education here, is that it's almost like a 50-50 split between government funding and private funding. So you get the best of both worlds. You can scale, but you can also create sort of niches with that extra funding that comes from that private sector, rather than the public that just does things boom willy-nilly. I mean, you can see the public education in this nation, it's gone backwards. But that half dichotomy, where especially the Catholic schools are able to inculcate people into a good moral framework, and then from there, a good moral framework builds a good work ethic, right? And now, whether that moral framework is Catholic or not, Catholic or Christian, is the best. It has been for generations. It's the reason that we modernized in the first place, because it gives you a good, strong base to work from. But if we can isolate this movement and turn it into an independence campaign through One Nation, through Advance Australia's funding, through some of those other parties that can maybe amalgamate into one larger party, bring in really good voices from the Liberals and the Nationals, and just create a conservative movement that is rallying around One Nation, there's a real opportunity here. So this is big news, because she's making moves, she's trying new things. I think things are going to start pushing ahead quite strongly for One Nation. Now, on the complete other side of this, well, not Greens, but Labor, and about the most Greens potential candidate possible, thick, dim-witted. I don't have too many regrets in my life, and the regrets that I do have are generally things that I didn't do rather than things that I did do. But right before the election, we had and I hadn't really done much looking into Chris Bowen. I've always said that. I really started looking at Australian politics maybe 6 to 12 months ago. I was really invested in on American politics, trying to get an understanding of the framework. It's also just, when on the surface level, it's a lot more interesting. It's sort of like reality TV for men, where like the consequences aren't, some girl going off crying because she got upset. The consequences of potential nuclear war. So American politics just has a lot more gravitas to it. But Australian politics has a lot of nuance. And the more that I'm reading into it, the more that I'm realizing there's a lot of little moving parts in the Australian government that you don't really know how any two pieces fit together and how they actually work, which I dislike in terms of creating a functional democracy. But it's really interesting when you get into the weeds. It's rife with potential for conspiracy theories. It is rife with it. There's so many things happening all at once. You could just sit down and listen to like government live feeds in the New South Wales government, and they'll basically show you exactly what they're talking about from this policy angle and that policy angle, and people get up for 3 minutes and do a speech, and one of these speeches is just like ripping apart another candidate, and then the next bloke gets up and he's like, I'd like to read the memorandum of Karen White, who died recently. She was a pillar of her community and we love her very much. And then he sits down, everyone gives a little clap, and then the next person gets up and rips into that bloke for no reason. Like nothing to do with what he just said, just rips into him just for giggles. Like a lot of it is performative. It's arts. It feels like it's just a scripted bunch of theater kids sitting inside of a room just pretending to actually do things but never actually getting anything done. And right before the election, someone called me and goes, "Oh, so what do you think about Chris Bowen?" And I was like, "Well, he's never done anything wrong to me. You know, he's never done it. He's actually been pretty good for the local area is flourishing. It's got nothing to do with Chris Bowen. Now, I know that now. But I gave him like a glowing review. It's like, would you vote for Chris Bowen? I was like, if he wasn't with Labor, I would vote for Chris Bowen, but I don't like Labor, so I'm not voting for Chris Bowen. I'm voting for One Nation at the time and Liberals second, Nationals. Blah, blah, blah. But for me, it was so jarring recently, right? Just going through Chris Bowen's actual accomplishments and realizing it's bugger all. It's bugger all. I mean, honestly, this bloke has done bugger all. He's been in politics now for almost 2 decades, right? And he's done, if not more, I think he's been more. 2004, he's been in this seat. And what's he done? I mean, just him, right? I think early on he did quite a bit. He was pretty decent early on, and McMahon had a bit of growth and things were sort of moving nicely. But the demographics inside of McMahon have shifted dramatically under his tenure. I mean, immigration is all the way up. Something like 30% of residents inside of McMahon now don't speak English at home. And it's only the kids who do. That's an insane number. How do you even communicate with these people? They're our neighbors, but we can't speak with them. We have not had the Holy Spirit drop on our tongues and be able to just understand anyone as of yet, as far as I know. And so I don't understand how he's still in his position. And it might just be ignorance because he gives a good face. He pretends like he's a good Catholic. He's turned up to my local church a couple of times to give a couple of speeches. And the guy I think he plays the part really, really, really well. I mean, let's put it this way. And this is something that I really dislike. Politicians can just jump from minister of this to minister of that and minister of this to minister of that. The bloke was minister for aging, whatever that is, minister for financial services and superannuation and corporate law. Okay. Minister for immigration and citizenship. And now he's the minister for climate change. Right? You probably want your representatives to be an expert, right? Or at least understand the thing. But you can't possibly really understand at the level where you're representing people aging, financial services, superannuation and corporate law, immigration and citizenship, and climate change and energy. Like, because they put both of them, they turned it into climate change and energy recently. How can you represent all 5 of those services, 6 if you actually dig down into the nitty-gritty of each of those roles? How can you represent all of those over the course of 20 years and pretend like you're an expert in any of them? Now, I get it. You know, I literally said this saying today or yesterday, a jack of all trades, but a master of none, but still better than a master of one. Yes, makes sense every day of the week. But the person who is representing the entire nation, right, we should be able to trust them on these matters. Right? Everyone points to RFK Jr. being the HHS secretary, and he's never been a doctor or anything like that. But the guy has been embroiled in health legality for his entire career, from waterways to vaccines to mental health, personal mental health crises as well. He's been a lawyer effectively fighting against the agency that he is now running for almost 20, 30 years. So he understands the way that system works. He understands the players, etc. So either Chris Bowen is a genius. I've heard him talk. I don't think he's a genius. Either he just happens to have cross-functional knowledge, minor, but cross-functional knowledge across many different topics, or the players are all the same inside of these industries. Ministry for Aging, Ministry for Financial Services, Immigration and Citizenship, and Climate Change. Somehow all the players are the same. They're the only real 3 options out of those that make any sense. So the news that's come out about Chris Bowen recently, I'll just read this one out to you. Electricity prices will climb and emissions reductions need to accelerate rapidly if the Albanese government is to reach its key 2030 climate target, Chris Bowen has warned. There needs to be some sort of right or writ or, per election constitution, right, that says these are the promises that we set out in our election. This is the time scale that we've been given to get this completed. And if we don't tick any of these off, we're gone. We're out. Or at least the minister's gone. He's out, right? Energy prices were meant to come down by $275. That's as of the last election. And that was the first promise that was made from the last election, 2022's election. From pretty much every metric, they've gone up by more than $200. From my perspective, it's gone up about $220 a quarter, not a year, a quarter. It's insane to me that, you can come in and promise something that dramatic. We're going to drop your power bill by $275. But it went up by $550. The actual cost of it went up by $550. And then they give you a $270 rebate. So sure, they give you a $270 rebate, but they're charging you 2 times more than they used to. And so you're not getting a rebate, you're paying extra. And people are starting to feel the pinch, and it's only going to get worse. Matt Canavan came out recently on the ABC, I believe it was, and did an interview, and he said that new modeling is stating that to get to the 2030 target, we're going to need to spend between $7 and $8 trillion to get that, to hit our emissions targets. That means that every single Australian is going to have to pay $300,000 out of their pockets by 2030. And they're accelerating this so that we get there by 2030, which Matt Canavan points out, we don't need to do that. We can just push it out to 2050, right? And say, we're going to slow roll this. We're going to keep funding our coal-fired plants. And that's where all the data fails. I mean, you look into this, and there was this bloke that did a big video on Sam Bamford. Sam Bamford made he runs a Two Worlds Collide podcast, really big on the political scene on the right. Really nice seeming bloke. I've never met him, but he seems he seems smart in the traditional sense. You know what I mean? Like if you put him outside, he'd survive, no problems. And he's got a great voice. He came out and basically did a breakdown of climate change, and it's, it's 0.04. Carbon is 0.04 of the world's atmosphere. Humans are responsible for approximately 1.3% of that, which technically that was a per annum stat. We deliver 3%, and so there's a compounding effect of the amount that we've done since 1800s. So he got that a little bit wrong, but everything outside of that, he was pretty much spot on. And this bloke comes out and he does this big dissertation on, the climate's warming because of humans. And we can tell because the carbon that is in the atmosphere is old carbon. So he uses this isotope study. If you dig down into the data of this, it's all BS science. It's all rubbish science. It's effectively some kid going out writing a research paper and everyone saying, "Oh yes, this is amazing. This is brilliant insight." But it's just that curtain's grey, so everyone's sad. Like the data doesn't actually add up at all. When you look at the way that the atmosphere is measured, it's measured by carbon isotope testing, which basically says that if you don't have a lot of C13 and C14 in the atmosphere, it means that the carbon age is very, very old. And they then just assume that carbon is fossil fuel carbon, and so you can tell that it's burnt petrol because it's old carbon. The problem with that is that the new studies that are coming out now is that all your glaciers are melting from the bottom up. And so they say, if it was ocean warming, then the ocean's warming would release CO2 that is newer CO2 because the plants that die in the water, the carbon evaporates. And once that carbon evaporates, we can actually measure the isotopes or the age of that carbon once it hits the atmosphere. The problem is that the glaciers aren't melting from the top and the water isn't heating from the top. And so the carbon that's being released is actually carbon that is sitting deep, deep underneath the ocean. And while it's sitting deep, deep underneath the ocean and the crust actually underneath is tectonically shifting and vapor gases are being released from underneath these glaciers, warming it from underneath and lifting up that old carbon, we're actually getting old carbon sets getting sent up into the atmosphere. And so they don't actually measure how much emissions humans release. They see how much is in the atmosphere at any given time, and then they measure the age of that carbon. Now, is carbon being in the atmosphere even a bad thing? More of it. The Earth's greener today than it ever has been. life is more abundant than it ever has been. There's no real negative to having more carbon. The data on whether more carbon equals more heat is actually not settled at all. Most of the data shows a negative correlation effect, actually. It's that when the Earth warms, which makes sense, when the Earth warms, you get more carbon as a result of that, not the other way around necessarily. And so, why are we spending all of these trillions of dollars and ruining so many lives to get to that point? Who's funding this? And to me, it seems like the same billionaires who want to reduce Earth's population. It's the same billionaires who hate humanity. It's the same billionaires who funded all of the teals in the last election. $11 million was spent on teals in the last election. And so I think Chris Bowen's got a lot to answer for. I think Pauline Hanson is on fire. And I think that Israel's finally getting back to what it is good at, which is intelligence. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi. In today's Corner of Contradictions, we're going to be going back a step to go forward a couple of steps. On Saturday's episode, we spoke about Jason Clare and his pledge to give $10 million to the Muslim community of Blaxland to build a community center. Now, as I said on Saturday's episode, to me, it feels like a bribe, right? We're talking about 30% of the population, which are Muslim in that area, and he's giving them $10 million to build, and they call it a community center, but 60% of the place it's a mosque, it's a prayer hall, right? It's got a small sports section, and it's got some amenities sections as well as 2 parking lots, which probably are going to be paid parking, so even more money coming in, right? And I wanted to go through the actual details and ask a couple more questions because it seems strange to me. Why is Tony Burke, I mean, you can see his name right here. Why is Tony Burke, MP, written in on this document? Now, I understand he's both the Home Affairs Minister, but he's also the Foreign Affairs Minister. He's got one more title. He's actually got a whole lot of titles. If you look into his, go do a quick search on Tony Burke and see how many titles actually are still sitting with him, or legacy titles and all these random minister of. He's got like 7 or 8 different things that he's the minister of. We mostly hear about his foreign affairs work because he's just so shocking on foreign affairs. So you mostly hear about him from that. And a lot of Australian media is negative politics, especially from Sky News at the moment, obviously, because they are sort of the opposition media. And so the opposition media is always a little bit more juicy than the, it's all flowers and rainbows over here media. But when you actually dig down into who is involved in this, so it's the United Muslims of Australia, right, which are actually started by the president of the Australian National Imams Council. Now, there's a lot of controversy. Well, it's not a lot, right? I mean, the guy who runs it, his name is Sheikh Shady, right? It's a terrible name to have because it just sounds like you're shady, right? It's a terrible name to have, but to all intents and purposes, that bloke actually seems pretty decent, right? He seems like a decent bloke. He seems like a good guy. He's always coming out. Mind you, when October 7th happened, nothing. He didn't make a post at all. He didn't condemn it. From what I've seen, there's been no condemnation on any of the Islamic pages that he runs or is affiliated with. And then 8 days after the initial October 7th attack, when the numbers were showing that Hamas had still killed or kidnapped more people than had been killed inside of Gaza, right? Or at least actual numbers that had come out to that point. He made a post on Instagram calling it a genocide. 8 days after October 7th, he came out and said that Israel was committing a genocide, and that language has been used throughout. Now, anyone who calls what happened in Gaza a genocide is either ill-informed, a propagandist, or downright stupid, right? I mean, the entire point of a genocide is the entire extermination of a people's, a faith, or a culture. That's the real definition of what a genocide is, right? And everyone says, oh, but the UN came out and they said that. No, what the UN said was that Gaza was under threat to potentially be in a situation where they could be genocided. That's what they actually said. They never actually said that Israel is committing a genocide. And not to mention that the group that came out and did it, if you looked on their website, they've scrubbed it now, but if you looked on their website, Adolf Hitler was listed as a genocide expert, which he is, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that Adolf Hitler was really, and he co-signed the thing. So it's all insane. So anyone who's coming out and saying that, and I get it, he's Palestinian, right? His family is Palestinian. And so he's got a stake there. I believe I mentioned him in the last episode as well. Appreciate it. He seems pretty good, but he's quite high up. I mean, the guy is actually, he runs a cross-faith, or he's part of a cross-faith committee board that is run by the government. He's followed by Anthony Albanese on Instagram. But there's a couple of things that I find troublesome. And one of the big ones in the organization that he runs, right, is, and they posted this live onto their website. So if you want to dig deep, go dig deep into it. It's this line right here. A lot of their stuff, everything about that says it's all Australian Muslims, Australian Muslims, Australian Muslims. That's troublesome in its own way because all you care about is Australian Muslims. That's your organization's point. I get that. But I mean, I don't think I've ever been to church and said Australian Christians. I would just say Christians. Like you're a Christian, you're in Australia, you're already Australian, right? But when you just say only Australian Muslims that you care about, right? And it's all throughout the text. It's not like it's even a small bit, and it's all about integrity of the faith and maintaining the faith. And one of the hard things with Islam, with the Muslim religion, is that you don't know who believes what. Christianity sort of cuts itself into different sects that are very public, and the churches sort of separate, right? Like you don't get to, I think you get almost no Catholic terror. We obviously had the sex scandals with the priests through basically the 1960s through to the early 90s. We had that issue. When you look at it from a numbers perspective, the Catholic Church as a percentage actually had way less sexual abuse claims than public schools. So and pretty much every other organization, but it's just so much more jarring because the Catholic Church has always been pretty much so good, right? And so they've done bad things, but as a general rule of thumb, they've been good. And so, when the good kid swears once, you sort of say, whoa, it's like that scene in The Avengers where Captain America says a swear word and, Tony Stark loses his mind, Iron Man loses his mind. It's insane. You don't expect it. And so it's just so much more jarring. But this portion right here, and it's hard because there's no translations, right? Catholic faith is effectively all in English these days. Most religions across the world do their stuff or at least major religions across the world do their stuff in English these days, so you can read almost all of it. The naming conventions in Islam remain in the original Islamic text, and so they just don't use the Arab writing, but they use the English translation into an Arab word, the English language lettering. Establishment of a new Australian Fatwa Council. A key announcement at the AGM was forming a new Australian Fatwa Council comprising 15 qualified imams and Muslim scholars from across the states and territories. These members are among Australia's most recognised and experienced imams in Islamic jurisprudence and theology. The new Fatwa Council will serve as a religious council under the ANIC, which Australian National Imams Council, responsible for issuing Islamic rulings, fatwas, providing scholarly guidance and addressing emerging issues in accordance with the Quran, Sunnah, and the consensus of mainstream Islamic scholarship. This initiative marks a significant step in strengthening Imam's religious and theological foundation in Australia. Now, why is this terrifying? Why do I dislike this? Because you can't have two courts of law, right? And that's what this is. A Fatwa Council is a court of law. It is a court of law dictated by the Imams who create rulings, right? It's like the old King Solomon, the King Solomon's wisdom story where a woman, a mistress and her slave both have a child at the same time, right? And the mistress's child dies in the night, and the slave's child is taken by the mistress in the night and made and swapped with her dead child. It was problematic back then for a child to die in bed with you, basically. They swapped the children. When the slave woke up, she said, that's my child. She knew it straight away. That's my child that you have. You've given me your dead child. And the mistress said, no, this is my child. Look, he's in my bed. They go to King Solomon, and King Solomon basically is mediating between the two. And then under his law, he effectively says, okay, well, why don't you both won't give up the baby, so let's cut the baby in half. The woman basically says, the slave says, no, let her have it. The mistress says, I'm fine with cutting the baby. And Solomon says, well, obviously, you're the actual mother because you wouldn't let your child die. The Fatwa Council is similar in that it's an authoritative religion-based council that effectively rules on Sharia law, right? And that's a big boogie word, but that's the definition of what a Fatwa Council is, right? Now, Sharia law encompasses a whole lot of stuff, right? It's like the 10 Commandments on steroids. It's the 10 Commandments, but everything else dictated in underneath and how you're meant to deal with it. Like when you read the Quran and the Hadith, right, and all of the different texts, there's so many different texts that come out and there's different translations, interpretations, etc. But what terrifies me about this is that are these Islamic courts now going to be able to rule on Islamic issues, obviously within Islamic faith, rule that a woman can be stoned? Could this court go further than Australian politics, right? The Australian legal system. Is it even legal to have a dual legal system in Australia that is outside of the States? And why do they need this? Now, if this wasn't called a fatwa, right? Because what a fatwa is a court of law under the Sharia law. That's what a fatwa is. Now, if you change the name, right, and you say, the Islamic Community Relationship Council, because that's what they're advertising it as. But a Fatwa Council is not that definitionally. They're advertising it as, hey, husband and wife have a dispute. They want to be able to settle it. They can go to the Imams, and the Imams will say, based upon the Sharia law, your relationship can be nullified or divorced, etc. As a general rule of thumb, these things progress. And they just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. At what point does that stop? Muslims are not a small population in Australia anymore. In any respect, again, by the numbers, they actually participate within their religion at a far higher rate than the Christians do in this country, by the percentages. And so you could be seeing 80 to 90% of Muslim affairs. What if there's a domestic violence claim? What if they're going to these fatwa councils instead of going to the proper services in Australia? And domestic violence is rife within Muslim households, and the threshold for domestic violence is much higher, right? So that's to say that, I mean, it is in the Quran that if the woman disobeys you or disagrees with you, then you can avoid sleeping with her, then you can avoid her, and then after that you can hit her, you can strike her. That's in, I believe it's the Quran, it might be the Hadith. Now, when you have a council that says that that's okay, when in Australia we've done so much work to always say it's never okay to hit a woman, how do we square that circle? How is that not just the fact that, and we fund it? That's the crazy, we fund these organizations, right? I mean, $10 million, right, to the community center in Blaxland, $25 million. I believe that's actually in here as well. Anti-discrimination, and successfully secured $25 million in national safety funding for mosques and Islamic institutions. Right. And we'll dig further into this because I've done a lot of looking into it. So if you actually look into the budget papers, and I'll zoom in on this one for you so you can read it properly. So where this money comes from is actually from a budgetary line that is called supporting social cohesion. And do you know where more than 60 million of the, I think it's $178 million is going to? It's not going to creating community centers, but community centers, not just Islamic community centers or Muslim community centers or Jewish community centers or Catholic community centers, which is the opposite of social cohesion. Like, this is social isolation. This is saying, hey, we're going to create a Muslim community center. We're going to create a Jewish community center or a Christian community center where all the Christians can go, right, and be happy together, and all the Jews can go here and be happy together, and all the Muslims can go here and be happy together, and they are as far away from each other as possible. And not only are they as far away from each other as possible, we're going to spend $60+ million to set these guys up with 4K cameras, so when one of them decides to do a terror attack or a severe crime against that building, we can catch it in 4K, post it up on social media and all the media, so that these groups hate each other even more. Like, what is your security system going to do? That's not social cohesion. That's filming the lack of social cohesion for clickbait later. Right? It's trying to stop people from attacking each other because you've isolated them into their own community centers and allowed them to fester in their own community centers without actually creating a cohesive society. There's a couple of good stuff in here, right? Like, I think that one of the things that has really been done well, and Queensland modeled this perfectly. Queensland did this really well. There's a huge African population in Queensland. I did not know this, but they set something up called the African Village, right? It's not like it's isolated from anyone. It's smack bang in the middle of, it's like a Chinatown style thing. And I did actually say that this wasn't a good thing the other day, right? But the Chinatown isn't just for Chinese people, right? And the community center, the Muslim community center, is a prayer hall, so it's not going to be for everyone. This African village, it's literally called African Village, which I thought pretty cool. At first, I was worried that it was going to be like they cut off a section and then just made like teepee huts and said that this is an African village, so the people that come from Africa can feel like they're at home, which was super racist on my part. But that's the first thing that popped into my head, was just like, imagine they just created like teepee village in the middle of Queensland somewhere, and that would just be hilarious. It's like, we can build homes for the Africans, but we can't build homes for the Aboriginals. But what it is actually is, it's very similar, but it's community halls, but not just for Africans. They do cultural shows and stuff like that in that area. And it's actually been proven to really work, right? And they do one thing which I really dislike. They're like, in the wording when they're in their community, it's like, we're here to support justice-affected individuals. You're just talking about criminals here. Like, we understand that young African migrants have a problem with crime. It's like justice-affected individuals, right? They're just criminals. They like machetes, right? Like, this isn't something that we need to shy away from. It's something that we need to tackle head on. And if you look up their websites, the actual websites from the village, they do it really specifically. And it's one of the things that I really love about the African community. Two things. One, hyper-Christian. Hyper-Christian. I just went to baptism yesterday. Both of the priests were African. Mega Christian community, right? I mean, the greatest persecution and actual genocide that's happening in the world today is happening inside of Nigeria right now, where all the Christians in Nigeria are being slaughtered by Islamist terrorists, right? That's the actual genocide, stated goal of what they're trying to do right now. 900,000 plus over the last 10 years. Christian community, and mate, they don't shy away from saying the truth in the African community. We have problem children. We have problem children. We want to fix the problem children. We're creating a community center so they stop being stupid and they come here, they pray to Jesus, and then they go get a job. And on their actual website, it's not word for word, but it's pretty much that when you look at the quotations that are coming from certain people, right? And that's what's really good about it. It's not willy-nilly pretending like the issue is the whole world that's around them and it's the justice system that's the problem and not the crime that's being committed by specific subsets of their communities. They're saying, hey, we've got an issue here. We're doing work to fix our community. We're not trying to change the system to be weaker. And Jacinta Allen's gone and done it again, or it's not her, right? She's not a lawyer, but it's her laws that are allowing this to happen. The 4 kids that we saw on video recently just came out of court, bail granted. We have the toughest bail laws. No, you don't. No, you don't. That's what happens when you allow this sort of stuff to continue to fester, is that your justice system basically just becomes a slap on the wrist and you can go back out. They didn't kill anyone, so they were able to get out. But they ran after people with machetes. So next time when they cut someone open, they'll be like, why was he... This isn't good enough. Why was he allowed to be out on the street? It's insane. Absolutely insane. What else do we have here? Now, one of the big problems that we've found with Yuma is that they affiliate, or at least have affiliated in the past up until 2023, but that was 4 or 5 years with a known member of a terrorist organization. And not just in small ways. This guy ran the youth camps for the Islamic community within, this one's the United Muslims Association, I believe, UMA, which is also founded by Sheikh Shady. Right. Now, I don't know if they've corrected it of their own volition or if it came out, because it did come out in a news story quite a while ago as a result of the fact that they were getting about $3.2 million of funding, the UMA, at the time. And someone broke the story that they were speaking with this guy from Hizb ut-Tahrir, terrorist organization. A known terrorist organization, banned from multiple countries, seriously problematic group of people. And one of their members was actually really involved with this organization. And so this is sort of some of the stuff that I'm really going to be wanting to talk about going into a conversation on Sunday, just speaking about how can Australians feel comfortable, right, with allowing Islam to spread when almost everywhere that it has spread, it's led to mass persecution. It's led to mass genocide, especially of Christians, funnily enough. The Jews just leave straight away, but the Christians especially, because it's their home, so they like to stay. And then they just get slaughtered. And so how can we be comfortable with this ideology? Even the good ones associate with terrorists, right? That stuff is scary. So I'm hoping that we can have a really reasonable conversation. I think we will. I actually know this guy from back in the day. Really good bloke. And I think I'm going to get a lot of insight into how and why the image of Islam is so bad. I don't think that it's the media that does it, because for years people have been playing softball with Islam. And I don't think that we give enough credence to the attacks that come out of that ideology. And I don't think we're going to be able to stop it or fix it. I think it has to be internal because there are great Muslims, right? There are great, great Muslims. And those people are the ones who need to step up and take the reins. There needs to be a centralized hub of authority that spreads down across all of Islam. Maybe they need the coming of a new prophet because there were prophets before and after Muhammad, right? It's not like he was the one and only prophet. Jesus was a prophet in their eyes. And after, there were prophets as well. And so maybe they need a new prophet to come out and clarify the texts, right? Maybe bring it into a single thing, maybe reform the ideology in the same way that Jesus reformed some of the harsher ideologies from the Old Testament and fulfilled them and said these are complete now. These are completed. They're not done away with, but they are completed. You no longer need to circumcise. Pork isn't going to kill you anymore. We know how to use fire these days, right? You don't need to, you can actually not stone someone for doing the wrong thing. You can actually just say, hey, have I done wrong? And so I'm looking forward to that conversation. I was hoping to get to a section today just going through comments, but I think I'm going to have to leave it there today. It's going to be over an hour of conversation here. So once I cut it down, I'm sure it'll come okay, but I've enjoyed the episode. I think that Chris is blowing it. Right. I've got a couple of names now. So it's Chrisis, right? So it's Chrisis. Chris is a blowing it. Chris is a blowing a hole in your wallet. Chrisis is a blowing. There's a couple of names coming out, and I think he's doing a terrible job. I think he needs to go. I think K-Rod needs to go. I think Pauline Hanson is ascendant. She needs to start pumping out really good new policies that are going to get people excited. I think that I'm really looking forward to this conversation with the Imam on Sunday. Hopefully it comes out really fruitful. I'll be sending a list of questions prior so that it's not just like, I've got to pretend like I'm just throwing these hardball questions, and if he can't think of stuff off the top of his head, then he doesn't have a chance to answer. I want it to be fruitful conversation. I don't want it to be an attack, but I want it to be tough but fair. I want to come out of that having learnt some really good stuff, and I want to come out of that having my mind change. So I'm going to be asking the questions that I have that concern me. And if you've got questions that you want me to ask, let me know and I will ask them. As long as they are not insulting and as long as they are not rude, because that's not what I'm there for. I don't want to insult people. I'll make jokes that are probably insulting at some point, but I'm not intending to actually insult people. I'm trying to get a laugh, right? And sort of make people better through humor. Dark humor solves all things, most things. That's been the episode today. My name is Mark Pirotta, and this has been the Mark Pirotta Show. God bless.